This podcast may contain explicit language. A boy's best friend is his mother. Psycho is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan. Is it true, by the way?
Is what true?
That a boy's best friend is his mom.
Not in my case. It would be more you than her.
Yes,
I don't think she'd be upset at me stating what are pretty known facts by this point. I mean, as much shit as you give me and how much we try and annoy each other actively during this program, I think there's a fairly strong friendship, let's say, between the two of us. So, welcome into another of our great revisit episodes that we record before the holidays so that I have more time to spend not editing. But we're here yet again to discuss an Alfred Hitchcock classic. So without further ado, we are revisiting Psycho, which we did approximately in season 2 when we did our month of Alfred Hitchcock. For our 289th episode, we revisit his horror classic from 1960, which celebrated its 65th anniversary earlier this year. Directed by Alfred Hitchcock, of course. Written by Joseph Stefano. Cinematography by John L. Russell. Music by Bernard Herrmann. Editing by Geroge Tomasini. Starring Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. Vera Miles as Lila Crane. John Gavin as Sam Loomis. Martin Balsam as Milton Arbogast. John McIntyre as Deputy Sheriff Al Chambers. Simon Oakland as Dr. Richmond. Frank Albertson as Tom Cassidy. Pat Hitchcock as Caroline, Vaughn Taylor as George Lowry, Lorene Tuttle as Mrs. Chambers, John Anderson as California Charlie, Mort Mills as the highway patrol officer with the eerie sunglasses, and Janet Leigh as Marion Crane. Quick background for the movie, Psycho was wide released on September 8th, 1960. On a rough budget of about $800,000, Psycho would gross $32 million, finishing as the number 2 movie of 1960 and the highest grossing movie of Hitchcock's career. Critics at the time were extremely polarized, with one not only walking out of the theater but quitting her job just for seeing the film. Nevertheless, mere months after its initial release, critics came around on the film already to include it in their top 10s of the year. It was nominated for 4 Oscars. It's one of the rare times that Alfred Hitchcock was nominated for Best Director. I think it was only 2 other times. Rebecca and Rear Window, I think, are the 2 other films he was nominated for Best Director.
Yep.
Supporting actress for Janet Leigh, art direction for Black and White, and cinematography in Black and White for Russell. In 1992, the film was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. Psycho has appeared on a number of lists by websites, television channels, and magazines. The shower scene was featured at number 4 on the list of Bravo 100 Network Scariest Movie Moments, while the finale was ranked number 4 on Premiere's similar list. In the BFI's 2012 Sight and Sound polls of the greatest films ever made, Psycho was 35th among critics and 48th among directors. In the earlier 2002 version of the list, the film ranked 35th among critics, yet again, but was 19th among directors. So I'm not sure why it's backsliding among directors. That seems weird. But in the 2022 edition, the most recent version, it was 31st in the critics poll, so going up a bit, and 46th in the directors poll. In 1998, Time Out conducted a readers poll, and Psycho was voted the 29th greatest film of all time. The Village Voice ranked it number 19 on its list of the top 250 best films of the century list in 1999. The film was listed as one of TCM's top 15 most influential films of all time. Entertainment Weekly voted as the 11th greatest film of all time in 1999. In January 2002, the film was included on the list of the top 100 essential films of all time by the National Society of Film Critics. It was included in Time's all-time 100 best movies list in 2005. In 2005, Total Film ranked Psycho as the 6th greatest horror film of all time. In 2010, The Guardian newspaper ranked it as the best horror film of all time. Director Martin Scorsese included Psycho in his list of the 11 scariest horror films of all time. The film was named as the third best horror film of all time in a reader's poll by Rolling Stone magazine in 2014. In 2017, Empire magazine's reader's poll ranked it number 53 on its list of the 100 greatest movies. In an earlier poll held by the same magazine in 2008, it was voted 45th on the list of the 500 greatest films of all time. In 2021, the film was ranked number 5 by Time Out on their list of the 100 best horror movies. In 2012, the Motion Picture Editors Guild listed the film as the 12th best edited film of all time based on the survey of its membership. It was ranked 8th in the BBC's 2015 list of the 100 greatest American films. In 2022, Variety named Psycho the greatest movie of all time, and in 2024 is the third greatest horror film. AFI has recognized Psycho on the following lists: 100 Years, 100 Movies at number 18, 100 Years, 100 Thrills at number 1. For its 100 heroes and villains, Norman Bates was the number 2 villain of all time. For its 100 Years, 100 Movie quotes, a boy's best friend is his mother was number 56. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Film scores was number 4, and AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies 10th Anniversary Edition, it placed number 14. Currently holds a 97 among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 97 score on Metacritic, and a 4.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Now, of course, we can't do this by ourselves, so we bring in our returning celebrity guest. She is the host of her now famous podcast around the world, I've Seen That One, now for her third time on the show to date, the cinematic connoisseur from Canyon Country. Please welcome back, Klarissa.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me back. I am so excited to dive into this movie. I've had a blast diving into other classics, and this will be no different. This is a fantastic movie, and this is going to be great. It's going to be a great time.
So, Dad, we covered this, I believe, in 2021 for our roughly Halloween episode, capping off of our Hitchcock month at the time. You have said that Alfred Hitchcock is your favorite director of all time.
Yes.
Where do you place Psycho among his greatest films?
Well, this is a defined greatest, okay? It's not the one I like the best, but I think it is his greatest film. If you're giving it from an artistic point of view and a filmmaking point of view, it is his best. I mean, this is at the point where he was a master of cinema, and he used every trick in the book in order to make this film into something that was a true masterpiece.
Given that this is part of possibly the 4 greatest film run of all time by a particular director, Vertigo in 58, North by Northwest 59, Psycho in 60, he's doing television at the same time, and then The Birds in 63. The only other director that I could maybe compare with a seminal set of films, 4 in a row that are all-time classics that just about everybody knows, with the exception of 1941, is Steven Spielberg going from Jaws to Close Encounters of the Third Kind to Raiders of the Lost Ark to E.T. But that might be the only comparison to this run that Hitchcock is on in the late 50s, early 60s.
I would put the run that Rob Reiner had in there pretty darn close.
That might be fair, especially since multiple of those have finished very highly on several lists. Didn't exactly make all of the CLP list, but whether you want to talk Stand By Me, Princess Bride, I think somewhere...
When Harry Met Sally, Misery,
and A Few Good Men. That's a pretty good run, yeah.
Yeah, I'd stack that up against most.
I don't know if it quite reaches this level, but it's like a really good B.
Yes.
So what is so influential about this film? I've heard a lot of people, and let's be fair, I have referred to myself as a big wuss on this program, particularly for horror films. It is not my genre. So I will leave it to the people who enjoy it maybe a little bit more, or are able to at least tolerate it better than I do. why is this film talked about as almost the seminal movie that creates the modern horror film?
I feel like there's a lot to break down with this movie, but we also have, like, this is one of the first times that we see our main character, like our perceived main character, die and disappear like halfway through. And that is huge. It is so massive, and especially having this heartthrob Janet Leigh, and we're following this really intense story, and her story becomes almost moot because it's not what her demise was. It wasn't because she had stolen this money. The money was just thrown in the trunk. I mean, there was so much that just he built up and then completely demolished because she entered a different storyline. And I think that is so interesting. And that's almost what makes it a little bit more horrifying. I'm in a slasher class right now, and so we're kind of breaking down like these tropes of slasher horror. And we've talked about like a lot in my class the difference between horror and thriller. And in those moments, what is thriller, like what's thrilling and what's horrific. And so the fact that we have her all of a sudden, like there's so much thrill, there's so much anticipation, we don't know what's going on, we're uncomfortable as an audience, and then there's just pure horror from something that we can't really comprehend, is what really makes this movie so different from others, I personally think. Because all of a sudden we have horror and we don't know why. Like there's, she's being stabbed in the shower, but everything that we've seen, it should be, oh, someone's coming to get the money. Or like if there was going to be a horror moment in her storyline, it's not going to be from Norman Bates. So it's unpredictable. It cuts you off at the knees. You're left guessing, and you enter something that you really didn't see coming when you see this the first time. And if you're lucky enough to, at this point, not have it spoiled for you. Because sometimes, I mean, we know the shower scene. And sadly, when I went into this for the first time, I already knew kind of what was going to happen. But I didn't know the opening as much as I knew the second half. And so that was really interesting to experience. But I think that's what makes it so influential, is that it was so experimental in like the plot structure and what we're used to in horror and thrillers. And it really just set this cool precedent for possibilities in the genre.
One of the 2 points that I'd like to make in regards to this is, one, Hitchcock was a master of suspense and of plot twists. Except that what he did in this particular case is each plot twist was some horrific thing that most humans were not aware of, thought about, privy to, would grasp at any moment in time, because they were, I mean, you have the stabbing scenes. It's just something that was not done in movies, and people did not have familiarity with it. Then the whole psychiatric aspect of it. Then the Perkins being his own mother and dressed up as her. The mummified mother in the chair. All of this made it more horrific. Second point is that Hitchcock, since he funded this and he really marketed this big time, he's no one shall be seated after the film starts, because he was building up this whole suspense in and of itself, that this mystery of it. Why is it that you can't come in late into the film? The suspense of it was greater than anything else. But he marketed after this. He did what was probably some of the first exit polling of films to find out public reaction. And about a third of the people swear they saw Janet Leigh stabbed multiple times. Hitchcock proved that you could use film by camera cuts and quick jumps to convey something that was not actually shown. And that's one of the things that makes it into a masterpiece, is his ability to manipulate your visual and your reaction without actually having it happen.
I think it's going to be extremely difficult for me to put my thoughts or my experience myself into the mind of 1960s viewers that were just so unaccustomed to this level of violence on film. Nowadays, this is so quaint because we're used to these modern, even like thrillers or stuff that's just action films is significantly more violent. There's much more violence in Die Hard than there is in this movie. But this was horrific 28 years prior. So the differences in film culture is just vast. But the only thing that I can maybe create to kind of this subversive nature of killing off a main character like that is when Game of Thrones came out for its first season and people went nuts because the main character, spoiler, dies in like episode 9 of the first season. We've been following Sean Bean's character this entire time, and all of a sudden he's beheaded and you're like, what the fuck? What just happened? So I guess I can understand it from that standpoint. But the other part of it is that, and maybe I'm not the best vessel to be discussing this particularly, but at least my understanding of horror films up to this point was it was kind of this fantastical figure. Most of the horror films were like The Swamp Thing or Creature from the Black Lagoon or Dracula or Nosferatu. It's these like mythical creatures, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. They weren't everyday people. And to see this guy who's a mild-mannered clerk at a motel be the villain and his mother was just something unusual. So I think between those couple of things to just really subvert the audience attention, then you want to say the additional marketing campaign behind it and the rest of it, and Alfred Hitchcock's status by that point as also being like this larger figure because of television and television's importance at that point in time, about 1960, when it really became the number one communication medium in the country. I think all three of those things really focused in at a point in time where it made him probably have, I would say, arguably his most important film and the film that he was leading towards up until that point. And I don't think could ever quite get to again after this tipping point. I think for me, this is probably his apex.
When you mentioned the fact that some critic not only walked out, but she quit her job over this, I can just picture Hitchcock laughing and going, I can't get better publicity than that.
Just wait till Did You Know?
And it reminded me of the scene from Bill Murray's Scrooged, where they watched your trailer and a woman died. And he goes, you can't buy better publicity than that.
So, Dad, what is your relationship to the film?
I started getting into Hitchcock when I was in high school and started watching a few of his films. And I knew of Psycho, and my dad and I talked about it because pretty sure my dad saw it. And if he didn't see it originally, he saw it when it was put on television in the 60s. I'm pretty sure, though, he went and saw it. And so we had always talked about this. But it wasn't readily available. You couldn't just find it. I think I finally got a hold of a copy of it by recording it off on my VHS off of it was before Turner Classic even came out. I think it was at that time AMC was doing old movies yet, or older movies. And I think I recorded a copy of it, then watched it. So my guess is I didn't watch it probably until I was in law school. And then I think I watched it again. I didn't watch the whole thing. I only had part of it for whatever reason. And then I watched it again probably about 15 to 20 years later. And now it's just something that I turn to periodically.
I want to say this is only the third time I've seen it. I believe the first time that I watched it, and this was one that was so built up for me in my mind, kind of like Jaws was. The first time that I saw it, I was expecting this to be this, especially because I've never done well with horror films, this bigger than life thing of just horrific proportions. And well, yes, I was kind of nervous and afraid of certain things. I think it was more built up for me than what the reality of the situation is, because I'm used to a lot more violence than was apparent at the time, and it really doesn't bother me as much. Some of these older ones, they just feel so outdated compared to what scares us anymore. And like a random episode of Dexter almost is somewhat more horrific and violent than most of these movies. But that being said, I remember watching this for a film project, and I can't remember what class it was for. It might have been for like theater class, along with A Streetcar Named Desire, Marlon Brando's version from 52, I think it was. So I remember watching it then. I think I watched it for when we did this the first time, and now this is the third time. I don't have a huge, long relationship with it, but it sticks in the back of my mind because it's so iconic.
So I watched this with friends after I graduated high school. I didn't really grow up watching Hitchcocks. I grew up watching a couple of other more like golden age thrillers, but these I got into more in high school. And I started with Rear Window and The Birds. I didn't really go into Psycho until I was with my friends, and that's because my parents didn't have us watch rated R movies in our house. And this is technically rated R, even though I watched this movie and I'm like, why is this rated R? I mean, of course we feel that way, but different time. And it's definitely really interesting. I watched it with a big group of friends, and a lot of people weren't really into quote unquote black and white or old movies. They just didn't really love them. But I was completely zoned in, and I remember it so well. I remember it like it was yesterday because I feel like I knew this movie was famous, and I watched Psych growing up, and there's like an episode, like there's a serial killer in Psych where he references Psycho, and he references all these Hitchcocks, and it's so fun. And so I was like, okay, I kind of know Psycho, and like I've heard it. It's, flown around, it's been referenced, and it was super fun. But this, I was like, this is something like mind blowing to me. And it was the first time that I saw more like horror, like a golden age horror, as opposed to thriller. And that was really fun. It was really, really fun.
There was more upheaval or more uproar about the fact that Janet Leigh was in a half slip and bra in two different scenes of the movie than there was about the violence.
Right.
Well,
that is so crazy.
Additionally, to be fair, and this is a weird Hollywood record on this particular movie, but this is also the first time a toilet was flushed in a film.
Yeah, I did hear that. That is crazy.
And it at least serves the plot, so it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's that. I mean, for 65 years ago, it feels like a very, very long time ago, because that just seems so stupid to our modern sensibilities. But
right.
Dad, do you have a plot summary ready for us?
I do. Psycho begins with Marion Crane, Janet Leigh, a young woman who steals a large sum of money from her job in the hope of starting a new life. While driving to see her boyfriend in another state, she becomes tired and stops for the night at a small, lonely motel run by a quiet, awkward young man named Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins. Norman lives in the shadow of his mysterious and controlling mother, who he says stays in the old house behind the motel. Later that night, Marion is brutally murdered. When Marion doesn't return home, her sister Lila, Vera Miles, and Marion's boyfriend Sam, John Gavin, begin searching for her. Private detective named Arbogast, Martin Balsam, also investigates and grows suspicious of Norman's strange behavior.
Thank you. So what is this film about? If I'm going to throw something out, just for the sake of it, I will say it's actually got this really dark, grisly conception of mental health.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that.
I think from the title to the fact that we have that explanation at the end, it tries to put at arm's length people who are very mentally unstable. That anyone who's mentally unstable is capable of this level of violence, which I don't think obviously is not true, but I think it creates this unintentional stigma behind it.
Yeah. It's super interesting how it's all handled. I was watching this again like this week, and I was kind of surprised at how quickly they like dove into Norman's psyche in like this one moment where they're like, not exactly, it could have been his mom. And it's like, I don't know, I work in mental health and I see how, I mean, there, it takes a long time to like start to kind of delve into the technical sides of how people feel, or how that, like, even if they take on different personalities, or if they are trying to absorb things, or their actions are unreliable, right? Like there is a lot to discuss with his behaviors, and I feel like it happens so fast. It's just like, here he is and we understand him, and now we know exactly what happened. I feel like it confronts it in an interesting way of like, oh yeah, we see this, here it is, you know what I mean? Like that was kind of an interesting side to me of like addressing mental health specifically with his actions. And I love that you mentioned the title. It's such an interesting way of like, oh yeah, we just know this is Psycho. And I feel like I've heard Psycho as a movie title for so long that I don't really dive into as if I had heard this for the first time and then seen this movie and what that title tied to this movie entails. There's a lot to break down there. So I agree.
Well, and going to the title and its usage, when has anyone ever been referred as a clinical psycho? It's always in a dismissive way. You're a psycho. And
Yeah.
it's one way of just completely dismissing them as maybe a human being or their point of view or whatever else. It's always in some derogatory fashion.
Mm-hmm. Is the book called Psycho?
I believe it is.
Okay.
Well, the book and the movie and all of this is loosely tied to Ed Gein, who was from a neighboring community of ours or mine right now, where Tom grew up. Yeah,
about
Ed Gein,
20 minutes from here.
Yep, Plainfield, Wisconsin. And in fact, because the fact that everybody knew everybody and everybody knew one of the victims in Washera County where this took place, they drew the jury from Wood County where I live and bust them down to the courthouse there for the jury trial because they couldn't find a jury that wasn't going to be biased.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of ties. And in fact, a lot of when he was found originally not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect and sent to Mendota Mental Health, which is not far from where Tom lives right now. And then he eventually was held competent to stand trial. And in 1962, they had the trial in Washera County with the jury drawn from Wood County. And they had reporters from, I don't know, from the Washington Post and from the New York Times and the AP. And they all stayed in the Hotel Mead in Wisconsin Rapids because there wasn't a hotel in Washera County. So they would drive down with the bus with the jury down for the trial to watch it.
Wow. Holy cow, that's like a super big tie for you guys. Well, I was going to say, have you guys seen Hitchcock, the like Sir Anthony Hopkins biopic?
I have not.
Yeah, it dives into just this movie. It's not like his life, it's him making Psycho specifically. Okay. And he, in this movie, the way that they kind of like portray him is he is like talking to Ed Gein as this is happening, and he's like drawing inspiration, and he says like, Ed, what would you do? And like there's these flashes, and so Ed Gein has a part of that like conversation in his mind as he's like pulling Psycho together, and he's rushing to buy out all the books, and it's really interesting to like delve into with that. And especially, I mean, all of the details of Gein's kills, but also his relationship with his mother and how that ties into Psycho and relates. It's so interesting. It is crazy.
Okay.
Watch it. I would say watch it. It sounds wacky when I put it that way, but it's really great. Anthony Hopkins is awesome, and Helen Mirren plays his wife. So good.
Anthony Hopkins is always good.
Yeah, and Janet Leigh is played by ScarJo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. All right, I guess that makes sense.
It's great. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, that was the first watch for me this year because I did a big Anthony Hopkins binge, and that was one I rewatched almost immediately after. I was like, I loved his performance, and it was fun. So it's nice that I watched that probably like 2 or 3 months ago, and then we were doing this episode. I'm like, wow, it's nice that it's nice and fresh, but I would definitely recommend it.
Okay. I guess one of the most controversial parts of the film is the epilogue tacked on at the end. The explanation, we've kind of briefly discussed it here. I go back and forth over whether it's necessary and whether it's not, whether it serves a greater purpose or it's just there to kind of explain things in the film in a way that it didn't need to. To some people, and I think one of the main criticisms is it gets to be somewhat hand-holding, and so they don't find it as necessary. But I think there's an element of that also could have been done, but maybe in a more clever way than in that one explanation sequence.
It was absolutely necessary in 1960, because if you would not have put that stuff in there, this would have just been some fantasy. And what Hitchcock did by putting that in there is to say, no. This is not fantasy. This stuff really exists. And there are these people out there. And that's what makes it even more horrific, because now people think that there are these mass murderers, these psychopaths who are out there doing this. And that's what makes it more frightening than anything. If he doesn't, people just dismiss it. There wasn't the level of knowledge about psychology and how and sociopaths work then as there was now.
I will grant that all to you, but that still doesn't mean it was necessary.
If you don't put an explanation in so people have an understanding of how this took place, they will dismiss it as being just unbelievable and fantasy. But by telling and making it sound believable and plausible as to the psychology involved in it, it made people buy in that this actually could happen.
Okay, so you're saying that both that people with mental illness such as this exist, but also we don't really have a great example other than this one really specific, fantastical story of Ed Gein, which is loosely based on, where this happens a lot. It's not like everybody who has delusions such as this are going out and killing people that they have, I don't know, a sexual attraction to.
There was, prior to this, now they've gone back and found where there's all kinds of instances in history. Other than Jack the Ripper, there is not a lot of talk of or examples of mass murders in the United States. They have gone back through and proven that these existed now, but there was not this level of psychology or knowledge anywhere that showed that these people existed and that there was these mass murder type killings going on. Example being The Devil in the White City, which was the Eric Larson book that was popular. They've gone back and established that this guy was killing people during the time of the Chicago World's Fair. They didn't know it at the time. They never thought about it, but they've since gone back and looked at records and established, yeah, that's what was going on. And people didn't think about it. We didn't really enter into the age, the Zodiac, John Wayne Gacy. Any of these people are all post Psycho. They're all more recent time. And I question that Psycho helped bring this into the current mainstream, the lexicon, the main point of society that these people existed. And I think to some extent that stirred on the interest in these types of horrific events.
But again, your point is that it was necessary. And I would argue that the incidence rate of serial killers and our attention to them is dramatically lower than the actual rate at which they happen. And our attention span makes these people larger than life, and our fascination with them makes them appear to be these grand figures. But is that really a necessary aid to society?
No, but it's an aid to explaining. As I've said, if you do not put this in there, people will pass this off. They will pass the movie off as being, this is just a fantasy. This would never happen. It could not happen. But by explaining how it can happen, it made people understand these people do exist, and this is not probably an isolated instance, which makes it more horrifying.
Yeah. I think too there's a lot to talk about with like that historical context, and even like we're still in the age of the Hays Code during this time, and there's a lot that it ran into with that. Like kind of confronting it. I think that this kind of like explication at the end really kind of delves into almost humanizing the psyche. I mean, because also, and again, like I said, in my slashers class, we've talked about Psycho and what it did for horror going forward from there and how it was working towards the end of the code. And some people would maybe argue that this is a proto slasher because he does have, and like, I mean, it's sounds explicit, it is, but he has the phallic weapon and he has multiple kills that are intimate kills. And he has kind of like a supernatural disguise that he's hiding behind in the motives of these kills, right? So like there's kind of that element to it, but at the time, again, like there were so many barriers where this movie almost wasn't made that it was like, I have to explain again that these people exist, but what is happening here? And there really wasn't a conversation as much at the time of like, you know, like we said, this wasn't something that became a super big or like publicly spoken about thing until after this and like Ed Gein. And then we do move into this kind of like serial killer renaissance in the 70s, even to the 90s. And again, that's when we start to see that reflection in films starting. We have the proto slasher Peeping Tom the same year. We have The Bad Seed, which was 1956. But that was like a disturbed child kind of perspective. And so these movies were there, but a lot of them, it felt like were a little bit more specific and intentional. Like Jack the Ripper, there was a Jack the Ripper, and I think like again 1956, but it was literally called Jack the Ripper, and I mean Jack the Ripper is unsolved, but they had this like solving thing for it. But it was named Jack the Ripper because people already know who that was. And in Psycho, we have like this is inspired deeply by Ed Gein, but there's more of the conversation to be had there. And so it wasn't like people were just, I mean, for us, it's easy to say, like, oh, yeah, you don't have to explain it. I can leave that to my imagination. We could have just cut and had him locked up and having the voices of his mother and himself, like, partnering in the whole thing with the fly. And it could have ended without that, like, little explanation. But back then, I do feel like it contributed because the cultural shift was so different at the time compared to the stuff to come and the violence that came in like the new Hollywood Renaissance. So there's just so much to break down there. If that even makes sense.
This movie definitely calls for it.
It does. Well, and really, again, I mean, just the amount of barriers and the extent that Hitchcock went to make sure that this plot was honored. I mean, he went and he bought out like all of the books, as many as he could get his hands on. He bought all the books so people wouldn't read the book and then go see the movie. And, you know, that same thing of like, nobody can come in once the curtain parts or like once the doors are shut, you're done. You can't go in there. But it set a precedent for going forward for, I mean, we have Straight Jacket with Joan Crawford afterwards as well. And then in the 70s, what happens? We've got Texas Chainsaw and we've got Black Christmas. Like we have so many things that this movie really set a precedent for in the industry, but this was one of the firsts. Yeah.
I think it was 62 was when Tony Curtis, Janet Leigh's ex-husband, I think by this time, did the Boston Strangler.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's 1968?
I can't remember if Boston Strangler was 62 and then the movie came out in like 65 or 66, or if it was he was earlier and the movie came out in 62. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, did you know? Before Psycho, movie theaters would play shows on rotation all day long. People would frequently come in the middle of one and stay till the middle of the next showing, leaving when they came in. But Hitchcock made all of the movie theater owners sign a contract that they would not let anyone in until the start of the film. Once they were late, they would not be let in till the next showing. This started formalizing the whole process of mandatory seating times at theaters, which continues until today. So, one way of upending the industry.
Yeah.
Did you know? Director Sir Alfred Hitchcock was so pleased with the score written by Bernard Herrmann that he doubled the composer's salary to $34,501. Hitchcock later said 33% of the effect of Psycho was due to the music. Ironically, he was originally adamant that there should be no music in the shower scene, but he was persuaded by his wife to give it a try. The screeching violins and dire strings, which would inspire the music for Jaws, ended up selling the scene and driving theatrical audiences beyond anything they had ever experienced.
That's awesome.
It's hard to see this movie without it.
Yeah, it is. And it's almost like people who don't really know this movie or haven't seen it, they know the music and they know that scene. Yeah.
Did you know Sir Alfred Hitchcock wanted to make this movie so much that he deferred his standard $250,000 salary in lieu of 60% of the movie's gross? Paramount Pictures, believing that the movie would do so poorly at the box office, agreed. His personal earnings from the movie exceeded $15 million. Adjusted for inflation, that amount would be equivalent to over $156 million as of last year. Did you know? Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh said they did not mind being stereotyped forever because of their participation in this movie. They said in interviews they would rather be stereotyped and be remembered forever for this classic movie than not be remembered at all. I think people get a little too tight in their feelings about being stereotyped. I know that it might be challenging to break outside of those things, but sometimes in order to be remembered, you have one character. And sometimes you can break out of it, sometimes you can't, but it's better to have that one thing that people actually remember about you than to never have had it at all. I guess give me all the Don Drapers and the Walter Whites and the
Barney Fifes.
Name any iconic movie character. I guess Harrison Ford has two, but you don't get those often, and it's better to just do one and see what happens than to try and forego it because it doesn't fit, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you know Janet Leigh received threatening letters after the movie's release detailing what they would like to do to Marion Crane? One was so grotesque she passed it on to the FBI. The culprits were discovered, and the FBI said she should notify them again if she ever received any more letters.
My gosh. That is so disturbing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is part and parcel of the current world we live in, that it feels just like, oh, you got one letter?
Yeah.
The amount of things that are written like that on a Facebook comment thread or anything else.
It's true. It was a lot harder to... You had to be way more intentional about sending threats than you do now. You can just shoot it out there on your phone.
All right, and this one's just for you, Dad. Did you know, after the movie's release, Sir Alfred Hitchcock received an angry letter from the father of a girl who refused to have a bath after seeing Diabolique from 1955, and then refused to shower after seeing this movie? Hitchcock sent a note back simply saying, "Send her to the dry cleaners."
So good.
And with that, we will take our first break, and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 290th episode, we welcome back Ralph Esparza to discuss Heat from 1995, celebrating its 30th anniversary. Written and directed by Michael Mann, cinematography by Dante Spinati, music by Elliot Goldenthal, editing by Dov Honig, Pasquale Buba, William Goldenberg, and Tom Rolfe, starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Tom Sizemore, Ted Levine, Ashley Judd, John Voight, and Val Kilmer. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Before we get too much further, let's check in with our guest, Klarissa. What is going on with you, and where can people find you?
Well, I have a lot of fun things coming up. I've seen that one on Instagram, TikTok, and all of your podcast platforms. I have just been working through my book. I published a book in August, and it's 100 movies that I think any movie lover should see, or anybody should see. Really, it's mostly just if you're looking to go on a movie journey, you want to check classics off your list, this is a fun way to do it. And so you can journal about the movie, watch it, have a coloring page, and then listen to me talk about it with a guest, and then message me about it. Oh my gosh, talk to me about the movies. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now, and I'm excited to dive into some new projects in the new year and see if maybe I could prep another side book to go with it. I just love doing it. So lots of good stuff.
That sounds great. anything new on the podcast? This is going to be coming out about a week from now. What do you have in the near future before the end of the year?
Yes, I have got all of my December episodes recorded. So we've got Rebel Without a Cause. We'll have The Thing. We'll also have a Christmas special with Sarah Shea, Kate Westworth, and Brandon from the Front Row Classics. And it's going to be so much fun. We're going to dive into Golden Age Christmas movies. So if you're a sucker for Golden Age Christmas, make sure you don't miss it.
Yes, Sarah has been a guest on this program, and we were on with Brendan not too long ago on his show. So some excellent people to have on for that.
Put your
Totally.
whiskers outside the cover so they get air.
Love it.
Did you do that one?
No.
I have no idea what you're even talking about.
Miracle on
34th Street?
34th Street.
Oh, is that the original with like young
Yes.
Natalie Wood? Okay, I was like, that's what I thought you were referencing, but I was like, oh no, can I quote it?
Yes, because what happened was Edmund O'Brien played Santa, and there's a scene where he's getting into bed, and the guy says, "Santa, I always wondered." He goes, "Yes, I put my whiskers on the outside so that they get air and grow."
That's right. I have only seen the original once, and so I'm going to be revisiting it this year, but I'm so excited. It's so enchanting, but I do vaguely remember that. I will look out for it on this rewatch. So great.
Okay. So that takes us to our weekly reveal of the Cinema Legacy rankings. Or the Cinema Legacy poll rankings, I suppose I should say. Last week we left you off at numbers 20 through 16. Just a quick recap of those. That was Sunset Boulevard, Raiders of the Lost Ark at 19, 18 was Vertigo, 17 was Parasite, 16 The Matrix. So without further ado, here are numbers 15 through 11. At 15, we have what many have considered for many, many years, including the Sight and Sound poll for multiple decades on end, the greatest film ever made. I do not share that opinion, but don't hold it against the film. We have Citizen Kane from 1941. At number 14, we have the second and final Ridley Scott movie on the list after Blade Runner. We have Alien from 1979. 13, we have what many consider to be the greatest mobster or gangster movie ever made, and at least in the opinion of the collaborators on this list, the best Martin Scorsese has ever done. We have Goodfellas from 1990. At number 12, we have our highest ranking sci-fi film on the list, and our final one in the genre, the greatest ever Star Wars film, at least according to our pollsters for this list or this project. We have The Empire Strikes Back from 1980. Finally, at number 11, we have another Best Picture winner from 1974. We have the only Best Picture winner that was a sequel to the original that also won Best Picture. We have The Godfather Part 2. So just a quick recap again. Citizen Kane at 15. 14, Alien. 13, Goodfellas. 12, The Empire Strikes Back. And 11, The Godfather Part 2. Initial reactions.
So great. I personally love Citizen Kane. That's one that I spent like 2 weeks in a film studies class talking about. And the first time I watched it, I hadn't like paid attention to it as much. I was kind of like working and doing stuff. And I was like, what makes this movie super notable? And then I was like, oh, you have to watch it. Like you have to watch it. It's not like a plot thing as much as it's visually. And then I watched it at home intentionally, like phones off. And it blew my mind. It was so beautiful and cool. And I'm not a filmmaker, but I feel like I could see why filmmakers absolutely adore that movie.
I will defer all of my opinions on Citizen Kane to our episode that we discussed on it. I don't feel like I need to desecrate it any further here when we're technically honoring it, but you can go find my opinions if you want. They're plenty available on the internet.
I love the film. Always have. The minute I saw it, I thought it was a masterpiece. And I feel sorry for the fact that that Orson Welles took on the Hearst papers, lost big time, and ended up not only making a classic, but having his classic completely dissed, and then spent the rest of his career trying to emulate exactly what he did correct in the first film and overcome the fact that he completely lost any semblance of respect for Hollywood or the public or anything about the art. And he was so bitter by it. So it's just kind of, if only things would have been slightly different, he may have made several films that would have been iconic. As it is, he made several that were fairly iconic, but I think it could have been even better.
Well, some people, not me, also think The Magnificent Ambersons is an all-time classic, or Touch of Evil, or
Touch of Evil, I could go. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is his genius would pop up periodically in other films, but he, between being bitter and being, it's like you hit a grand slam your first right out of the as a first time at the plate as a rookie, and then spend the rest of your career trying to come up with the big moment again, never really getting there.
Okay.
As far as Godfather 2, it's one of the things that makes Coppola an icon in filmmaking. I mean, who else could produce part 1 and part 2 and win both, or win Best Picture for both?
And I think there's an argument to be made as to which one of the two is greater or better or whatever else. The point of this project was we asked people the 50 best films to try and separate it from our own greatest movie of all time rankings that we have here. I will say Empire Strikes Back is number 2 on the GMOAT list at this current moment. The Godfather Part 2 is number 19. 29 is Goodfellas. So a lot of these rank fairly highly. And then, of course, Citizen Kane. And the reason Citizen Kane is at 57 on our list is not because of me. Just say that much.
Okay.
So some additional factoids here on our nominees or our recognizees for the evening. As I mentioned before, this is the final 2 sci-fi films on the list, in Alien and The Empire Strikes Back. They joined The Matrix, Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Back to the Future, 2001, T2, Blade Runner, Interstellar, E.T., Eternal Sunshine, Wall-E, Arrival, and King Kong. Empire is the highest ranking of the genre, but it is by far our largest genre at 15 films. Alien is our 10th different horror film on the list so far, with Jurassic Park, The Silence of the Lambs, The Shining, The Exorcist, Nosferatu, Train to Busan, Night of the Living Dead, Seven, and The Thing. We still have 2 more, though, on the list to go. The Godfather Part 2 is the 25th different Best Picture winner we have recognized so far. It is only the 3rd from the 1970s. And I believe we have a few more yet to recognize. So I'll let people try and figure out what those remaining few are yet. Orson Welles' first and only appearance on the list with Citizen Kane. No other movie of his has made the list. Sir Ridley Scott's second and last appearance with Alien, joining Blade Runner, which was our number 38 film. This is our 3rd and last appearance for Martin Scorsese on the list in Goodfellas, joining Taxi Driver at number 30 and Raging Bull at number 105. This is our 2nd Francis Ford Coppola film on the list, with The Godfather Part 2 joining The Conversation at number 91. It is strange to me to think that Apocalypse Now did not make 120 plus ties. I think it is the highest ranking film on the Sight and Sound poll, the IMDb 250, the Letterboxd 250, to not make our list. If I remember that correctly. Current director breakdown: Akira Kurosawa still at 5 recognized films on the list. Christopher Nolan and Steven Spielberg tied at 4 apiece. We have 3 between Quentin Tarantino, David Fincher, Stanley Kubrick, Paul Thomas Anderson, Billy Wilder, Alfred Hitchcock, and Martin Scorsese. The Empire Strikes Back is our highest ranking and last film from the 1980s, so that closes out that decade. We have the highest ranking film of the 2000s, has already been revealed in There Will Be Blood. Parasite was the highest ranking film on the list from the 2010s, and we've closed out the 1920s as well. a very long time ago with Nosferatu, but otherwise every other decade still has one film left to go on the list. Currently, from each decade, we had 4 films from the 20s, 5 from the 30s, 9 from the 40s, 11 from the 1950s, 10 from the 1960s, 15 from the 1970s, 13 from the 1980s, and as I said, we closed out that decade, 20 from the 1990s, 12 from the 2000s, 10 from the 2010s, and the lone film from the 2020s in Oppenheimer. So, any other thoughts on these 5? We are getting down. This will be the last reveal before we get to the top 10. We have 5 more we're revealing next week, numbers 10 through 6, and then we'll reveal number 5 through 3, with our final 2 finishing up our last episode of the season.
Wonder what they will be.
Yeah.
Any predictions? Well, Dad, you obviously know, so you can't make predictions, but...
Oh my gosh. I feel like I've just consistently been surprised. And I'm not going to lie, my contributions were a lot more like emotional and whimsical. And then there were some where I was like, oh yeah, factual. But I was a little bit less intentional with like my strategy going into making the list. And so I feel like for me, I don't have as many predictions because I feel like if someone was more technical and some were more whimsical like me, I think I'm mostly just excited to see what happens. I'm just like having the best time watching and like seeing us narrow down this list. So I don't really have any specific predictions. I definitely was going to guess that Citizen Kane was going to be coming up here. So I'm happy that like now I know where we're at with that one. But I feel like that's one that consistently is a staple as a classic amongst a lot of people. And like a lot of people would consider that one of the best movies of all time. And so now I know where that sits. I don't know where this is going to go. And I kind of love it.
If it's not too much to reveal, and frankly, as the keeper of the list, I will say it's not. Every film inside the top 20 is an episode that we have covered personally on this show. So
wow.
If that helps reveal anything. And at least a few of these films we've covered more than once.
Holy cow.
Still chance for The Room.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Room is a possibility, as is Escape to Victory.
Wonderful. They are on the board.
Wedding Crashers would be a genuine surprise in the top 10.
Love it.
But otherwise, as always, you can find any of our work or anything related to the Cinema Legacy poll through the end of the year on any of our social media platforms. That's at GMOAT Podcast, GMOAT Podcast. And you can also follow us on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. We have all of our video clips up and available on Reels, on TikTok, on Facebook, on basically wherever you can find it. So we are widely available in all places on the internet. But I should also mention that the full and entire list up through this point is available also on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast. And that's Ronnie, RONNY, Ronnie Duncan Studios. So, all right. Getting back to the movie for the evening, and this would be normally where we would catch up with best performances and such. However, this is a revisit episode, so you can go back to our original episode on that in 2021. I'm not as self-conscious about episodes that are only from like season 2, when we figured out more of our footing, and that weren't probably our first 30 or so episodes where we were still trying to figure out the show, and we were doing it on Skype or like with lapel mics, and yeah, it was an adventure the first season of the show. But as we got our footing more by season 2 and kind of figured out what the show was and the identity and some of the tropes that we'd gotten into by that point, I don't feel nearly as self-conscious. You can go back and listen to the Psycho episode. You have my permission on that one, compared to some of the other ones where you do it at your own peril. But we are going to go right to the Stanley Rubric this evening. And originally on this one, so we will start with Legacy, as we always do. The original Legacy score for Psycho, when we discussed it at the end of October in 2021, over 4 years ago, was a 9.75. Just a recap on what legacy is. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out. So 1965 to today, the last 60 years. What is the legacy of the film as shared between two equal yet separate groups? That would be the audience and the industry. 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, at a 9.75, did we get this right or wrong? Higher, lower?
Higher. I am a perfect 10, 5. How many times have you seen in parody the shower scene redone in television and film? Okay. How many times do we have to have a remake? We've had 3 sequels, we've had 1 remake, and we have had how many scores of films and documentaries about Ed Gein, about the making of this film? We just talked about one with Sir Anthony Hopkins as Hitchcock. This film lives on and will forever be the signature. It will be as iconically related to Hitchcock, more than, because I think most people younger are not familiar with the infamous Hitchcock drawing that started every of one of the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, the profile drawing. I think that this and Hitchcock are tied forever, and I cannot find any reason why this should not have a perfect 10.
You'll find no disagreement from me. I also have a 10. I think it's one of the most influential films, not only of the genre, but just period in cinematic history. I think it is quite possibly, if it is not the best movie, by one of the, as we put it, the pantheon of directors. Like, this is one of the top 5 directors of all time, and possibly his best movie. That also would make a score for a 10. And I'm not even dividing it necessarily among the audience or the industry, but we read off the numerous accolades and recognitions that the industry has bestowed upon this film after it came out, and how revered it is, how influential it is. The audience, I believe, and bear with me for a second, but the now world famous Office poll had about half the people in the room had heard of and seen the film, roughly, and could name multiple people in the film, let alone its director. So I think its influence, its name recognition, its seeping into pop culture, its iconography are unquestionable. It's a 10.
Just the music. You immediately know the film.
You do. Yeah, my number is the exact same. Actually, I have 10, so it looks like 10s across the board. It just...
So what do you want to negotiate to?
I don't know, I'd settle for a 10, maybe.
I could go down to a 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot needing to be said here. I think, if anything, we were somewhat hedging our bets in season 2 as to where certain things were going to be. And I think slowly as we've evolved, we know roughly what a 10 is. This is a 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
All right, so with no disagreement there, and moving the score up 0.25 points to a 10, we move to impact and significance, which is a measure of, in the initial 5 years, so 1960 to 1965, what is the impact and significance shared among the same two groups, the industry and the audience, for a total of 10 points, 5 and 5 apiece. Now, originally, going back to 2021, we had a 7.75 average between the two of us. Dad, did we get this right or wrong?
Wrong. It should have been higher. Again, this was the second largest box office draw of 1960. Only Swiss Family Robinson outdrew it, which is, family. You're going to get a lot of kids in with their parents, etc. This is, being the more adult or mature film, beat everybody. Hitchcock gets a nomination for Best Director. Janet Leigh gets a nomination for Best Supporting Actress, wins a Golden Globe. Anthony Perkins is given high reviews. I think he was either nominated or won a Golden Globe. I think this started Hitchcock in his period of exploration of the psychological thriller, because right after this, he did The Birds, then he did Marnie. Again, another psychological thriller with Tippi Hedren and what was that guy's name? Bond, James Bond. Oh, yes.
Sean Connery?
Sean Connery. Yes. Anyway, so I think the industry bought into this. I think you started seeing a lot of these psychological thrillers. I think it's outside the range of impact and significance, but I see a pattern developing where you would not have Scorsese doing Taxi Driver, but for the evolution of the psychological thriller.
Although I would also argue that that's outside the 5-year time period that we're.
That's what I just said.
Okay.
But I said I think it started an evolution through the process because we had a bunch of those throughout the 60s. So I'm at a 10. I'm perfect again on this.
This is going to be one of the rare exceptions on a film that we discuss here, where I think that the audience is higher than the industry. I think the industry was still reticent to fully embrace Alfred Hitchcock in the moment. And whether you want to go back to the conversation we've had many times on this program about his involvement with television and how that was seen as such a lesser form, and the fact that he kind of didn't do another movie for 3 years, which was unusual for him. He was usually doing 1 to 2 almost every year during the 50s, and then he just kind of stops because he's making more television. I think this is his most successful film, but if you want to say it's, I guess, influential or it goes on to do anything, he does not make another movie for 3 years, and then I think he makes another one in like 1965. So it's like 2 movies over this next 5-year period. I don't think anybody else major from the cast went on to anything significant. I mean, this is by far what Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins are most known for. Vera Miles has some other films to her credit, particularly one we've discussed on the show, and that's a personal favorite of yours and mine, being The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. But outside of that, it's not like anybody from this movie is a huge commodity. It, yes, garnered 1 nomination of repute in a Best Director nomination, but didn't get nominated for Best Picture. Got Janet Leigh a Best Supporting Actress nomination, but that's 4 nominations that in some ways felt a little bit tokenish, given the nature of how successful the film was. It does get credit for changing a little bit of cinema culture in the moment, but I think it's more of a legacy issue with that than it is something that like completely revamped the industry in the way that like Jaws created the summer blockbuster and everybody's rushing to get their summer movie out the following year. So from that standpoint, I'm going to go with a 4 on industry, a 5 for the audience, because I think that's more unquestionable as to the impact on the audience and their appetite for this kind of movie and genre. And I'm going to go with a 9.
But you pointed out the change in the industry by the set time frame.
I know, and I already argued against it.
Okay.
Well, I am actually also going with a 10. So I'm agreeing with Dana. I think the biggest thing, especially here to see, is like, and again, I'm going to talk about my class, but like we're just diving so much into this time frame in horror and thrillers on this genre that it's really hard for me to like not address that this was such a big shift in what was allowed. And I mean, we've got the Hays Code coming to an end pretty soon after, but Peeping Tom, which was a proto slasher, one of our first kind of slasher movies that we have, and maybe even a pseudo slasher, is in this same year. And I think that that's notable. It wasn't in the US, so it didn't have to follow the Hays Code, but we have like a different kind of industry evolving, and this is pretty near to the Hollywood Renaissance and end of the code. And I don't know, I just feel like it's a little bit too influential in that time and like that shift, especially with those battles that it went through to be made with the Hays Code, to, I don't know, to say that it's not shifting the industry, but because it definitely shifted the genre, and especially what they could do with the genre in film. But audience, absolutely, I think this was so impactful. I mean, we talked about even at the time, everyone was really surprised by this movie. There was such a shock element, and even now, I watch it and I'm shocked by this movie. So I'm gonna go with a 10.
Let me add to this as I make my further argument. One of the reviews I read commented about this is the first time an American film was produced that brought the new wave of European films to the United States. I think this was the first film that started the whole new wave, the new Hollywood, the raw era that developed during the 60s.
Bosley Crowther's review in the New York Times at the time was comparing it to Diabolique, and it was more in tone and tenor than it is anything about the actual new wave. There's almost no new wave elements in this film.
Okay.
Really? I feel like they're like a little bit more risky with out of focus nudity in this movie.
Well, just the sheer raw violence and sexuality
pretty
together.
New wave. Yeah.
I mean, the couple of scenes where it shows the knife up against Janet Leigh's stomach, or at least the body double. I'm not sure who it was. You know, the fact is it's very phallic against the naked torso. So we're stuck now. We have 2 10s against 1 9. Where are we going with this? I will cede some of your points on the industry. If I would be willing to go down to a 4.5 if you're coming up.
So ending up at a 9.5?
Yes.
I was willing to give you actually capitulate higher, but sure.
Well,
given that this was originally a 7.75, 9.5 is a far cry from the original number.
Clarissa, what do you think? 9.5 or 10?
I think a 9.5 is still an acceptable amount. I mean, that's a 0.5. It's not too much weight, and I think that it can kind of settle in both points.
The only reason I'm hesitant is because I know what 0.5 can do on our scale at this point in time as far as where it ranks. So.
Yeah, that's fair.
But anyway, that's fine.
All right, so we have a 9.5 here. Let's move to novelty then. This is a measure of roughly the originality of anything having to do with the movie for 5 points, and the execution on anything in the movie for an additional 5 points for a total of 10. I'll open the scoring here and say we had this as originally a novelty of 10 in 2021, and I see absolutely no reason to change that.
I agree.
Correct.
It was highly original. It is highly executed. Nothing more to say. So would anyone like to start the negotiation?
I say 10.
Okay.
I won't settle for anything but a 10.
All right. So that's another 10 here. So for our first 3 scores, we have a 10. Well, let's compare it, I guess. We move from a 9.75 to a 10 on legacy, a 7.75 to a 9.5 on impact and significance, and we move from 10 to a 10 on novelty. So that looks like a good spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 261 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Carl Carafalio, 72, American actor and stuntman. The Fantastic Four, Casino, In the Line of Fire, which is an interesting note. Stephen Downing, 87, American screenwriter. McIver, Walking Tall, FX, the series, and a journalist. Gary Manny Moonfield, 63, musician, bassist for Stone Roses and Primal Scream. Udo Kier, 81, German actor. My Own Private Idaho, Ace Ventura, Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, and The Secret Agent. Jimmy Cliff, 81, Jamaican musician and actor. Songs, The Harder They Come, Many Rivers to Cross.
So we recognize these here for their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Okay, we left off at Classicness in between all of our scoring. Classicness is a measure really of how well something has aged or not, basically since it came out. This is a 65-year-old film. Many have deemed it quote-unquote a classic. What does that exactly mean? Most times we start at a baseline of 6 because it's easier to take points off, especially for an older film with different sentimentalities and such, than it is to give points up. But usually very few of the things that we're adding up for are, is it ahead of its time? Was it subversive, or did it reinvent the genre? Is it timeless? And so because this is a category of nuance and in the gray, we turn to our senior nuance correspondent, Dana. The original classic score on this was a 9.5. Did we get it right or wrong?
Wrong. I'm going to go down a little. And I'm going to go down to a 9, and it's for 2 reasons. One, the mummified mother, when I watched it again, looks so incredibly fake that it kind of distracted from me. It just was not at all as I remembered it. Okay. The second point is, while I understand the need for the scene for the psychologist to come in and explain the whole psychological aspect of Norman, it seems like a bad article from Psychology Today instead of really mental health 101 or even 401. And I think that distracts a little. I think it makes it too clean, too, catchy.
You mean kitschy?
Kitschy instead of real psychology. And so I think that distracts from it. Not huge, but those 2 points do bring it down for me. I think the fact that it was so ahead of its time, it was so classic, it was so wonderfully done, still keeps it in that classic range, but I think a 9 is a better number than 9.5.
I think you can make a very compelling argument that this movie is timeless. It's 65 years old, and other than like the fashion and the cars and some of the tech is a bit dated, but because you're watching an older film, you kind of let some of that go. Whereas I've said many times, watching cell phones from like the early 2000s in movies just always takes me out of them. But that's another thing for another day. What I will say here is I guess I overlooked some of the graphics. Like there are some moments in the shower scene that look like they were developed in 1960 as opposed to even like 1975, where they can get away with a few more tricks and pieces of the trade where they just developed things a little bit further. He was a bit revolutionary on this. I really don't see any major reasons to take points off. His techniques, what he was creating, the subversive nature of the genre, the horrifying elements, the psychosis, and the mental health aspects of this, I think are all significantly ahead of its time. So I was going to argue for a 10. I'll stay there for now, but I guess I'm open to some of what's been bandied about.
I think I'm really close to either just agreeing with Tom or only going to a 9.5 for any wiggle room. I feel like any of the like critiques of its timelessness fit nicely in that 0.5 in between 9.5 and 10. So maybe I'll just go with 9.5.
She's staking out the median position right off the bat because she knows that's where we're going to end up anyway.
Well, I just think like dropping down a full point is a bit like from a 10, to a 9. I wouldn't go that far, but I will grant like this space for some of that flexibility of we have a big time gap here.
I think the thing that works for me the best is because, especially I brought it up earlier, that the speech at the end just feels so out of place in a modern environment where, like, every horror film has that wrap-up scene at the end where everybody's covered by a blanket and the police have come out to, like, comfort everybody and somebody's in the back of an ambulance getting, like, helped in or whatever. There's always that scene. But to have this in the police station, have a psychologist, and then go through this, like, really long explanation. It's not even, like, a throwaway or something where it's just very... No, it's heavy exposition to end the film for like 10 minutes. It just feels weird and a little out of place.
Yeah. I think that's like the one thing because even for me, the mom's like mummification didn't bother me.
Yeah.
I think really it was just that explanation that felt a little long, but honestly for me, I didn't even question it. I just was like, yeah, okay. Okay.
I was a little more bothered that Anthony Perkins in drag was even less believable. So, all right, let's stake out the position. We'll just say it's a 9.5 and we'll agree with our original score on this one. So that does not change. Okay, so then we move to rewatchability, which is no longer a negotiating position. This is one where we just average the scores. The original score on this one was a 5.5. I think most of it probably had to do with the fact that this is a horror film, and subjectively, these are not my favorite to return to. This is definitely not my favorite Hitchcock film. That's North by Northwest from the year prior. But insert your said subjective test here. We'll start with our guest. What do you say?
Probably say like just one full point of 6. Like just rounding up to the next point, because again, this isn't one that I've watched a ton. It's one that I feel like if I were to rewatch and rewatch and rewatch, it would lose its like impact because it would just become a little bit more normal to me of like, oh yeah, I'm waiting for this thing. But this rewatch that I just did was the first time that I've watched it in a while. And so it was really nice for me to have that gap and come back and have that like again. And so to me, it's almost like I wouldn't recommend having this be like a yearly rotation even. I'm like, give it 3 years in between. Rewatch it. It's definitely one you can rewatch in your lifetime, but this is, and this kind of goes against what I usually say, because I am a huge movie rewatcher. I will put a movie back on right after I finish it. I'm not afraid to do it. I actually love doing that. But this one I think is kind of, that's the impact, and it speaks very highly to the film itself of like you're gonna want to like watch this with fresh eyes again, but I wouldn't say that it's as rewatchable as other movies.
For me, every time I seem to watch this film, I find more about it that is intriguing. I see more of the mastery of Hitchcock. So actually, this is a film that I now can see myself putting on a given day. It's a rainy day and I have nothing really going on, and I would just love to sit and watch a film for its enjoyment and watching to see how a master does something. I have always been fascinated by people who can do things better than me. I'll sit and watch. That's one of the reasons why I love to go to symphonies and such, watch people play instruments that I could never play. And watching Hitchcock do this is just mastery. I'm at a 7 at this point in time. It just keeps getting better. This is fine wine to me.
I've been doing more of an objective scoring this entire season to try and keep a baseline of what I guess the audience or the general public appetite might be for this than maybe my own personal values. Because on a personal level, I don't feel like I need to watch this that often because I know all the beats of the story. I know all the specific scenes where it's like iconic and important. It is decent to return to it every so often, but it's not something I go out of my way on a personal level to watch. But I think the appetite for the general audience right now to watch horror is much higher than it's probably been in a long time, or at least like it feels that way, and they're getting satiated by a lot of horror films. Hollywood is really leaning into the genre, and I think it's becoming somewhat more reflected in the variety, the types, and how much we're even willing to somewhat, and I think this is going to be the case again this year, reward it with awards attention yet again. And so from that standpoint, yes, it is black and white. So that does knock off a little bit of the fervor to watch something like this. But I think it's classic enough, and you can describe to people its roots and the influence and the rest of it, that if you're a genuine film lover and not just an average fan, I think I can sell probably 7 out of 10 people to watch this and possibly rewatch it within a couple of years. So I'm going to go with a 7 here, and that would make the average between the three of us a 6.67. If you're watching the YouTube, I'm doing the hand gesture just for everybody else out there. And I have a sinking feeling my father has absolutely no idea what that is, which is great.
Be proud of that.
Let's move to audience score then. Audience score originally on this one, going back 4 years, was an 88% for Google users and a 95% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 9.15. However, the Google users, for some unknown reason, moved down to an 85%. So we have an 85% for Google users and a 95% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 9 and moving down 0.15 points. So to repeat the categories, we moved in Legacy from a 9.75 to a 10. Impact and Significance, we moved from a 7.75 to a 9.5. On Novelty, we stayed the same at a 10. Classicness, we stayed the same at a 9.5. On Rewatchability, we moved from a 5.5 to a 6.67. And from Audience Score, we moved slightly down from a 9.15 to a 9. Currently, this places at number 42 on our list at 51.65 points. That leaves us at a score of 54.67, and currently placing it on our list at number 10 between Pulp Fiction and The Godfather.
Awesome.
So it moves up a full 32 places.
Great.
Wow.
And I believe that is our second ranking. Third ranking Hitchcock film on the list. So you know our obvious proclivity towards Alfred Hitchcock. North by Northwest is at number 5. Rear Window is at number 7. So this will be the third ranking Alfred Hitchcock film on the list. As usual, if you have any commentary on any of our scores, our arguments, anything that you'd like to talk to us about, or not talk to us about, but just would like to give us props for anything, you can write us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, or you can get us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast. I will also mention here, just briefly, this is something that is being a push by the financiers of the show, and I guess the financial backing. They would like to know if anyone is interested in GMOAT having a merch store. So if you want to write in and let us know whether you'd be interested in purchasing or having us set up a GMOAT merch store. So for all the 5-time members, the people who get to 5 times, they automatically get their hat. Right now, if you get to 10 times, you get a t-shirt. 15 times, we've started doing the polos. But if you don't want to go through all of that hassle and you just want to buy one yourself, What would you be interested in doing? If you want to write us and let us know whether you'd be interested in that, we would appreciate that, so we have some feedback from you, our wonderful audience, on whether you'd like us to go through with that. But continuing on, remaining questions for this one. Do Sam and Lila get together afterward?
Hell no. Why would you want to constantly be reminded of this?
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be, like, other than the fact that they're connected by this one person, like there's any sexual tension between them.
No. Yeah, I agree. I mean, while there's maybe like trauma bonding, there's just not any like chemistry. It's just them trying to get to the bottom of it. And you can tell that they both are there because they care about her, not about each other.
Yeah. All right, Dad, I'm going to set you up for a lawyer question here. How do you defend Norman Bates?
It's an NGI all day. Not guilty by insanity. It is so obvious. He's not competent. He does not understand what's going on. His inability to understand or comprehend the mens rea, the necessary elements, which is the intent to commit the crime, prevents him from being found culpable. He's not going to be tried. This is a clear case. I mean, all you'd have to do is put the damn psychologist who comes into the room on the stand for 5 minutes, and the judge is going to have no choice but to agree.
This has been Lawyer Scenes with Dana. Maybe eventually his TikTok series that I keep just telling him to do, and he just refuses to actually take the time to do. So instead, while we're finishing, finally, after months, Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV, and he's just complaining about the chain of evidence and all the problems with the police's case and everything else that's going on, maybe eventually you'll hear all of this in his rants that I have to listen to. I'd rather he did it for all the TikTok people who would care much more than I do. Because I have to live with it every day anyway.
I thought about taking some time to do that this weekend. We'll see if it works out.
Yeah, just take any random movie or TV show that's somewhat semi-popular that has any legal aspect to it whatsoever.
Especially when it comes to criminal defense. I did it for 17 years. I was pretty good at it. I have a lot more wins than I had losses in criminal defense, which is almost unheard of. And I just, I don't know who's writing these. I don't know who the creative consultants are, but wow.
So coming to a TikTok or a vertical video near you. But any remaining questions for either of you? Hearing none, I'd like to thank our guest for being back with us for her third time. You will be back with us again next August, I believe is your next time up, with La La Land. But just remind everybody quickly between then and now what you got going on, what you're working on, and where people can find you.
Awesome. Well, seriously, thank you so much again for having me on. This is such a blast. I love the Stanley Rubric. That is still one of the most clever things I've ever heard in my life. But everyone listening, I've seen that one on Instagram, TikTok, and your podcasting platforms. If you're interested in diving into a movie journey like you have been here, we're doing something pretty similar with just chatting through movies we think you should be watching. So definitely find me there. Let's chat movies. But thank you so much again, you two. I have had so much fun. I can't wait for that TikTok series, and I will keep my eye out for it. And I will see you in August.
Sounds good. Dad, any remaining thoughts for the week?
We had an interesting couple of weeks. I mean, we did get several movies in.
Well, we've covered a few last week. I think the only two new ones that we might say, or stuff that we've mutually consumed, like I said a minute ago, we have finished Your Friends and Neighbors, which I think, other than the fact that it kind of wraps up a little too neatly at the end of the season one, so it seemed a little bit like they weren't necessarily planning on a season two, but now they are. I thought it was a mostly good series, except that everybody in the series is not a good person. But if you can get beyond that, okay. We also saw Wicked for Good.
Yes.
Which I don't want to go into. I guess I know it's probably 2 weeks by the time this comes out to when people will see it, but knowing that our guest has not seen the film, we will try and avoid spoilers. I will say it it doesn't reach the pure highs of the first one for me, where you go in blind and you're just exposed to this whole thing and this new story and whatever else. And the somewhat forced storyline where it's intersecting with the actual Wizard of Oz storyline and putting all of that together, just it felt like it was something that was tacked on as a coda to the first movie, as opposed to something that was wholly its own and really carrying the story forward, or that it had something new to say. And so by that extension, I didn't enjoy it as much. I don't think that, outside of maybe a few technical awards, that it probably should be nominated for much. And I think right now the consensus among critics has been that it's kind of looked its way out of that. That being said, it was a commercial success, and apparently Universal is, to my own personal horror, looking to expand upon this universe and capitalize and milk whatever money they can out of this at all. But your thoughts, Dave?
Of course. Well, we also saw Good Fortune.
Well, we talked about that last week.
I didn't think we did.
That was 2 weeks ago already. And what you're looking for is Roofman.
Yeah, we did watch Roofman, which I thought was enjoyable. It was okay.
It was a well-done film that, like, I have a great amount of respect for, and I thought there were compelling characters in it. But overall, the story, I've said now a few times in the last month or so, I have a really hard time with self-destructive characters. And the guy at the center of the film, you want him to kind of have this redemption arc, and that's just not real. And it's based on this true story that, I mean, I won't ruin it for anybody, but you can definitely look it up if you really wanted to. It's a well done, well put together movie. There's no complaints from that standpoint. Channing Tatum's very good in the film, but outside of it just being a quality film, I don't know if it's anything I'm personally going to return to, because I don't know. I think it has a message to say, but nothing that I have to revisit multiple times.
No.
So any other remaining thoughts?
No, I'm looking forward to the upcoming holidays and some of the movies that are yet to be coming.
When are you getting that James Bond series in?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Life slips away.
So as I mentioned before, we only have a few episodes remaining left in the season. We have Heat next week. After that, we have Movies and Us coming on to guest on our show for Raging Bull. Not the movie I would have thought that they would have picked, but that's what they wanted. So that's going to be interesting. And then we finish up our season with Promising Young Woman, which is, I think, the first film that we've actively discussed. When it came out, we discussed it during award season, and now we're actually covering during the course of the show. We've been on that long that we can cover a movie that's been at least 5 years, because this is near the end of season 6 already. We'll be heading into season 7 here in a little over a month. So that's a little odd to think, but regardless.
I think when we started the show, my hair was actually a little bit brown yet.
I don't know about brown, but it definitely wasn't white. It's definitely white now.
I'm glad I got my dad's coloring, because my mother's was not the best looking. So my dad was white, and it could be a lot worse.
Certainly could. But that will be our final film covered for the season. And then we're, I believe, planning a couple of different live show events during the Christmas, New Year's festival in between, because, well, frankly, in the course of things, we have almost a month off from the show in real time. There will be things coming out, so it's not like we're taking a full time off. Like, it'll be 2 weeks where we have off officially in between the end of the season and when we're going to pick back up. But as far as our recording schedule, we're not going to be recording for almost a month. And so we're going to probably plan on having a couple of more things out here for some additional content, including the James Bond series, as well as our planning meeting for season 8, taking you behind the scenes for that as well. So we've got some stuff coming up, and we'll definitely hit you back up here before the end of the year. But As usual, thank you everyone for being with us for yet another week. Happy Thanksgiving, or happy belated Thanksgiving, and happy holiday season. We hope you're enjoying whatever you are doing with your family or found family, and safe travels to everyone. That'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. A guy told me one time, don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner. Next week, for our 290th episode, we welcome back Ralph Esparza to discuss Heat from 1995, celebrating its 30th anniversary. Written and directed by Michael Mann, cinematography by Dante Spinati, music by Elliot Goldenthal, editing by Dov Honig, Pasquale Buba, William Goldenberg, and Tom Rolfe. Starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Tom Sizemore, Ted Levine, Ashley Judd, John Voight, and Val Kilmer. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, TikTok, or Blue Sky at the handle at GMOAT Podcast. Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.